So here we go. Okay, we're at the DPW meeting on 3/21, mostly to review the MVP action grant presentation. But before we do, the first item on the agenda, and also the request that I usually have about recording of the meeting, I believe it's only LCAT. Is there anybody else here recording? I see none. So first thing on the agenda is the 3:15 meeting minutes. Mike, do you have anything?
I looked at the minutes. I have no edits to make. Pending any edits, I make a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting on March 15th, 2023.
And I second it. Any no remarks? No. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the MVP action grant presentation, I guess, Bruce, will you be making that with some help?
Yes, but before we get started, I just want to give the board an update on our West Mass Development Corp. We submitted a EOI on last Friday for a MassWorks infrastructure grant. This is the preliminary statement of interest that we put together last Friday. The full application is due in June, but we're very confident about the grant. We're hopeful. The project total for our Chestnut pump station upgrade is roughly about $2.5 million. The town council voted last night in favor of the 25% design in the amount of $41,700 in order to get started on the 25% design. So we're getting starting on it, and hopefully we'll have some good news in the near future with that upgrade.
That's good news.
That's real good news. That helps us on defining our rate structure and future costs on the water billing rates. So that's real good.
Yep, very good. So we can get started on the MVP action grant. We're already on slide 1. So first and foremost, I want to introduce everybody here. Philip Hebert is our chairman of the Board of Public Works. We have Michael Lynch, our vice chair. As part of our program team as well, we have Mark Berman out in the audience out there, our deputy superintendent, Felix Vachon, our water and sewer administrator. We have Daryl Keene, our highway and utilities manager, and Robert Roy, our facilities manager. We also have Bailey Mitchell, our planning and community development director, and Nina Fazio, our planning and community development administrative assistant. Mouthful. So part of this MVP action grant it's actually combined between two towns. The towns of Hampden and East Long Meadow received a municipal vulnerability preparedness action grant in 2021 from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. The grant funds climate resilient action prioritizations by each community and their community resilience and building workshops. Good.
Thanks, Bruce. My name is Taylor, and I'm a community engagement specialist with Howard Stein Hudson. And before we get started, I just wanted to go over the Zoom controls for today's meeting for those joining us virtually. So if you wish to unmute to speak or remute yourself, you can click on the microphone icon that's down there on the toolbar. If you want to turn your camera on and off, you can click on the camera icon. To ask a question and share your comments, you can click on the chat icon. And if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand using the hand icon. Lastly, I just wanted to note that today's presentation is being recorded. So let's get started.
Thank you, Taylor. And I'm Mary Monahan, and I'm part of the project team. So late this evening, we're going to stay only in the afternoon. We're going to talk about the project that's been happening in the town of East Long Meadow. So today's agenda includes that introduction about the project and how it started, the need to have public participation, and the fact that all of the folks here will contribute to that requirement for the town of East Long Meadow to show substantial public participation. You'll hear the speakers talk about how these concept plans and recommendations, which were developed in concert with the town, reflect the town's priorities that you would have developed in your initial MVP planning exercise, as well as working with Bruce and other town members. This was what was important to the town today. You'll hear about the next steps, whether it's local forces that can do some of the work, whether it's positioning these projects for future funding opportunities, or incorporating that into your annual budgeting. And then we're going to conclude with questions and discussions.
Good job, Mary. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Tyler. I'm just going to take a moment to introduce the project team here with us today. With Howard Stein Hudson is myself. And also there is Chris Lyman, one of our civil engineers that worked quite a bit on the inspections townwide. Taylor Miller has been our public involvement specialist throughout. Mary Monahan, who just went, is with MLM Enterprises. And also we have Casey Arminetti from Landscape Interactions. But I also want to take a moment to introduce Casey. It works with Abramson, who is the lead designer with Landscape Interactions. And other project partners we have include Andrew Smith. Andrew is our MVP regional coordinator for this project. And without him and the MVP program, none of us would be here tonight. Just like to take a minute. Is Andrew available online where he'd like to be able to say something?
Not here yet. Very good. I'll check again later. That's like that. Other participants were presenting your kind of these long meadow, Kevin correctly, from the Office of Planning and Community Development. Very involved in the work. Of course, the town of Andrew has been a partner in the project. Town effort, similar activity for both towns. Mass Audubon with the Latin Grove facility.
Some of our site work and our outreach and training to students. Bay State Roads was a participant. Bay State Roads is out of UMass Amherst, and they're the state technical training program for DPWs and Public Works. I'll tell more about them later. Graziano Gardens, also one of our partners, hosted one of our events. Girls of the Valley, Inc. Girls Inc. of the Valley was a strong participant, along with DCR Holyoke Heritage State Park. Viola with the Department of Public Works at Holyoke, and CN Wood, a vendor for much of the public works equipment throughout the Commonwealth. And now I'll turn it back over to Mary to tell us about the grant.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So almost 2 years ago, the towns of Hamden and East Long Meadow received a grant, a cash award of $389,092. Note that there's an obligation, 25% for in-kind services, which from the state's perspective makes the total project value of over $500,000. We're at the end of this right now. You'll hear a lot about what happened before. There's a website you can go to also learn about it. But these are the items, the products of this work that have some actions that can be taken. Again, this was a action grant, not meant to be another plan that sits on a shelf. So between Bruce and the project team here, you'll hear about those projects that will be moving forward. And I just want to note, because it's important, Massachusetts was a leader in developing climate resiliency funding and recognizing it as a need for communities. So the MVP program was started by former Governor Baker. And what makes it unique is these funds support the projects that you decided were important. It wasn't money given to do what they said to do, but it's money given to you that reflected your priorities in your community. Okay.
Thank you, Mary. And just an overview of those activities. This has been a 2-year project. We're winding down on the second of those 2 years. Things that have occurred over that time include we've maintained a project information and public participation website. We will provide that link, and it's also available on our handouts. It still has all of the information that a host to look at what we're presenting tonight and all of the work that has occurred over the past 2 years. We held a student climate resiliency workshop that was held at the DCR Holyoke Heritage State Park. We also held the low impact development best management practices workshops. One has occurred in Graziano Gardens, and the second one is to occur this spring. We performed inspections and assessments at 28 culvert locations in East Longmeadow. We coordinated with Bay State Roads, as I mentioned earlier, for the training of the DPW staff on the culvert inspection methodology. And that methodology utilizes an organization that's called the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative. And that's a group that of scientists and water specialists that identified the nature-based approach to inspecting and assessing culverts, not only for flood type concerns, but also for environmental and biological concerns. We made an identification of green infrastructure and low impact design opportunities throughout all the locations that we investigated. And with that, we also proceeded with the development of pollinator garden concepts at 2 locations in each town. Ultimately, we're going to generate a large watershed assessment finding. And this meeting is the public review and comment meeting towards the information that we've developed so far and what Chris will talk about later on these boards. And that will lead to the final resiliency study findings and recommendation reports. I'll turn it over to Taylor to discuss some of the other project activities.
So now I just want to talk a little bit about the public participation that went into this project. As Steve and Mary both mentioned so far, like this is your project, and we tried to gather as much public feedback as possible to build out these projects. And so since the project began, we had a project-specific website. There's a shortened URL up there. You can use to go visit it. And on that website, you can find the GIS maps that we've created. There's an interactive feedback map, which has been live this entire time to get public feedback. Project reports that have been written up until now, and photos from all of our different public participation events. Also, as Steve mentioned, there was a student climate resiliency workshop that happened last year. This happened at the Holyoke Heritage Park with students in Hampton, East Longmeadow, Wilbraham, and girls in the Valley. And that day was full of hands-on workshops that covered climate change threats, resiliency strategies, environmental justice concerns, and the role of public works in protecting communities from these threats. Mary?
Okay, so last May, Graziano Gardens worked with us and hosted our first of what's going to be 2 BMP best management practices and low impact development workshops that targeted residents. What can you do in your backyard with respect to incorporating native plantings, pollinator plants? What was interesting about this day, we had about 10 plus people show up, but climate change came home to roost that day. This was a date in May. If you recall, May had a couple of days where the temperature exceeded 100 degrees. That was one of these. Our original site was out on the tarmac. We had all these nice plantings for folks to look at, and it was hotter than Hades. So the workshop went inside. It was a great conversation with those that showed up. But again, it brought back home the idea that the plantings, because of changes in temperature, as well as the need to attract pollinators, retain water quality, plantings in people's individual gardens can change and help support these efforts. What's that?
So program outcomes and benefits. So part of this process helped, obviously, me as the superintendent of public works develop a 10-year capital improvement plan based on our assessments of each and every one of our culverts. We actually put it in our FY24 capital plan for this year. DPW also participated in 2-day hands-on class on culvert inspection provided by the Mass DOT. In the past, we did not have this, this sort of inspection in place as far as inspection forms. We do have this now. So when our stormwater foreman does go out to each and every culvert on a yearly basis to inspect, we uploaded that form into our survey 123, which the foreman uses and identifies obviously inconsistencies or failures within the culvert itself. So that is directly uploaded into our GIS system as a result. So any of these structures we're keeping track on a yearly basis. to ensure they are safe and obviously updating our capital plan for replacement. Also receive training and tools to investigate all culverts and bridges, investigation into potential sites for green infrastructure and low impact development projects that reduce stormwater runoff and promote biodiversity. East Long Meadow feels that they received the tools needed to ensure that the safety of the town's residents by mitigating future flooding and strategically planning the repair replacement of these existing structures and culverts.
Thank you, Bruce. So yeah, my name is Chris Lyman. I'm a staff civil engineer at Howard Stein Hudson. I was part of the field inspection team for the culverts located in East Long Meadow. So you might have seen me last year around inspecting culverts. I was also part of the assessment and prioritization team for assessing and prioritizing these culverts, which I'm now going to kind of go through in these next couple of slides and talk about how first we identified the culverts and then how we end up prioritizing them for the town. So at the start of this project, East Long Meadow really had us focus on two main priorities. The first priority was roadway accessibility. It's really important to note that with so many more severe storm events we're having, it's important that emergency personnel and DPW services can get where they're needed, especially during major flooding events. You can see here on the top corner is at the center of town, and then the bottom one is the Shaker Road. It's really important because these type of flooding events can cause road closures, means that services aren't getting where they're needed. We work with the town and we're able to identify historical flooding areas within the town, and infrastructure might be overwhelmed by this occurring storm events. The second priority that we wanted to focus on with the town was water quality. Working with the town, we identified locations that could utilize green infrastructure and low impact developments, and that can be used to slow down and filter stormwater runoff before it reaches streams, rivers, and other bodies of water. Slide. So through a previous MVP study, 28 culvert locations throughout East Long Meadow were identified for further assessment. These 28 culvert locations were assessed and prioritized using four main criteria. The first criteria we used was structural condition. So this was our field inspection. We were out in the field and did our field inspections using this culvert assessment form you can see on the right. Using this form, we were able to determine if culverts were in adequate, poor, or critical condition during our field inspections. An example of a culvert that was seen as being in poor condition, you can see in the top corner picture there. That's on Allen Street here in East Long Meadow. So the things we're kind of looking for in these projects was how does the interior of the culvert look? How do the head walls of the culverts look? And then even how the roadway over the top of the culvert kind of looks. So that can really be an identifier of how the structure itself is performing. The second criteria we used was to prioritize these culverts was flow constriction. In order to do this, we looked at the existing width of the culvert and compared it to the existing natural stream width that you saw. So if you look at the bottom picture here, this is a great example of a culvert that might be undersized. You can see how much narrower the culvert opening is compared to the actual stream width you can see. The third criteria we used to prioritize these culverts was the impact that it had to transportation. So we looked at all 28 culverts and really assessed what type of roadway they're located on. So you have your local roads or driveways like Brook Street or Spate Arden here in East Long Meadow. They're more residential streets. They're not used for major travel throughout the day. Then we looked at whether they're on collectors or arterials. So you can think of a collector like Westwood Avenue. It's kind of one of those roads used to be able to get out of a residential area and get onto a main street. So culverts that are located on that might be higher prioritized because they affect more people in the town than culverts located on local roads. But the last major thing we really looked at was culverts that are located on arterials. So that's like your North Main Street, Summer Road, stuff like that. Things that are used to get in and out of the town and things that are going to be used by emergency services to really go full around town. So you can imagine if a culvert goes out on North Main Street, it kind of might split the town from one to the other, where it might cause emergency services to have kind of detour around, to be able to get to certain locations they want to get to. And the last criteria we used was the Climate Resiliency Design Standard tool. This tool really is used to determine preliminary climate change exposures and risks at each culvert location. The tool really looks at criteria such as sea level rise, extreme participation, and areas that have extreme heat. So we really wanted to look at this. Again, this is a preliminary tool that we use, but it's used to at least locate areas that maybe have, especially in the town of East Long Meadow, that might have high precipitation areas and high heat risk. Next slide. So from these four criteria, we came up with a priority score. priority score was determined by adding up the culvert's roadway score, which I talked about. So if you look at the roadway score here, culverts are located on more local roads, got a rating of a 5. But culverts are maybe located like such thing as like Allen Street or North Main Street got a rating of a 3, which means they're higher priority. It's also important to note that scores go from the lower the score, the higher the priority. So you can see on the right here, the priority score goes from ascending order. So the lower the priority score, the higher we saw the culvert was a priority. We also looked at the structural condition score. Again, that was when I talked about whether certain elements of the culvert were viewed as being either adequate or critical. So depending on the number of attributes that were marked as being adequate, they got a certain amount of score for each attribute. And that's kind of how we came with our structural condition score. And then we looked at our flow constriction score. So again, that's where I was talking about whether the culvert was maybe sized properly. Because if the culvert's not sized properly, it can cause upstream flooding because not enough water is able to pass through during high stream events. But it can also cause culvert overtopping, which is where the road can potentially get washed out completely. So the flow constriction score again was 1 to 5 really, but 1's being where the culvert was really assessed to be like a fourth of the size it should be, where maybe a culvert that maybe was right around maybe a 3/4, maybe we got a 3. That's how we kind of use our flow constriction score to determine like what culvert maybe was undersized. And again, using that, we were able to come up with our priority score, which can be seen here on the right, and that's how we got to our top 10 culverts here in East Long Meadow. So shown on the screen here is our first 5 top 10 culvert priority concepts we came up from that priority list. You'll be able to have public comments. You can see them here up on the board. Also, if you want to make public comments on these specific concepts, you can either make them here in person, or you can make them online on the project website. Sorry. Here you can see our other 5 priority concept culverts. And I'm going to hand over to Bruce to kind of go over a couple of these concepts just in person so the town kind of describe what their priorities was at these locations and then what we kind of propose to do at these locations.
Next one that's kind of we think as the Department of Public Works is one of the highest priorities is the Heritage Park culvert. The precipitation sheet flows from this elevated northeast section of the parking lot of the 65-acre property and feeds indirectly into the pond. During heavy rainfall, there is no way for the town to control the 24-inch reinforced concrete pipe for increased flows. The Department of Public Works recommends reconstruction of the head wall, increase the reinforced concrete pipe to a 48-inch, and install a new weir to control flows in the height of the pond. Heritage Park is one of the most visible areas when it comes to flooding, given the proximity of the one of the most traveled roads in town. Also, Spate Arden Culvert is another problematic area. After further investigations, part of this grant, Spate Arden Culvert consists of 3 30-inch reinforced concrete pipes, half-buried pipe in the Pecusik stream bed. The culvert sediment has increased significantly over the years and is in dire need of restoration. The head walls are failing due to erosion and stormwater runoff. We have also identified a crust 8-inch vitrified clay pipe within the culvert that needs replacement also. The Department of Public Works, from what we have discovered at that location, has applied for a grant for rehabilitation of this culvert and all related piping based on our investigation as part of this MVP grant activities.
So again, thanks, Bruce. So this is the first location Bruce was talking about here at Heritage Park in North Main Street. Bruce said the main priority of the town is they really wanted to focus on being able to control the level of Heritage Pond. So what we're proposing here is a weir structure head wall that will allow the town basically to set the elevation of the pond. So whenever the elevation of the pond gets over that certain elevation that we see adequate, it'll spill out over and into the new proposed 30-foot long by 24-inch diameter reinforced concrete pipe. At this time, we just went with a 24-inch diameter pipe because this is just in the concept stages. When these actually go to design stages, they'll go through the Massachusetts stream costing standards, which really looks at maybe the proper size this pipe needs to be based on amount of inflow, because this structure also gets flow from all the closed stormwater drainage from this part of town. This is the other location that Bruce kind of talked about. This is Spate Arden. What we're proposing here is we're proposing a 55-foot long by 9-foot wide by 4-foot high box culvert buried 12 inches in the natural stream bed. We're doing this because it seems that some of the erosion on the head wall was actually caused by it being a 3-barrel culvert. When you're getting high stream flows, it's really those parts of the head wall that are separating the pipes really get a lot of the brunt of the force, and it really can cause some erosion. So having a singular structure like a box culvert will allow for stream flow to pass right through the culvert without having those restrictions. It was also important this was a good location because of the sewer pipe that the town talked about replacing. It met a high priority that if the town was going to replace their sewer pipe, it was a good location to also replace the culvert at the same time. Fine. So besides priority culvert locations, Howard Stein Hudson and the town assessed culvert locations for green infrastructure in low impact developments. The 28 culvert locations were assessed and prioritized for green infrastructure and low impact development using 5 main criteria. The first criteria we looked at was whether the culvert or the area was located within public land or right of way. The second criteria we looked was whether the culvert was located within a floodplain. Then we also looked whether it was within 50 feet of a wetlands or a rare priority habitat, whether it was located within 100 foot of open space, or if it was already considered a priority culvert location. The reason why we looked at areas that were already priority culvert locations, because we really wanted to show how low impact designs and actual structures can work hand in hand with dealing with climate change and with flooding problems. So the 2 main criteria that we looked for concepts here in the town of East Meadow was vegetated water bioswales. Bioswales are best suited for roadways that do not have existing curb or drainage systems. The bioswales collect water as it runs off the side of the road and treats the water and redirects the roadway runoff to the nearest stream or body of water or a closed drainage system. The second typical concept we looked for the town of East Long Meadow was rain gardens or wet garden treatment areas. These treatment areas tend to be best suited for roadways that have existing curb or drainage systems because they can be used to filter existing drainage systems as they outlet into existing streams, water bodies. So they're good areas where maybe you cut back where the outlet is located, if it's located right at the end of the stream bed, and you can put in these treatment areas which not only treat the water as it filters to the natural stream that's supposed to go to, but it also infiltrates some of that storm water. So you're also putting potentially less runoff into the stream itself, which will also help with that stream not flooding. So here is the first 5 of our top green infrastructure and low impact development concepts. You can see in the top right-hand corner, we are proposing to have a low impact and green infrastructure concept at Heritage Park. This location was selected by us for landscape interactions to do a further concept design for this area. And I'm going to kind of have Casey and Bruce talk about this a little bit later. Next slide. And here are other top 5 green infrastructure and low impact development locations. If you look at the bottom right concept, this is Centerfield Park. So this location was not a culvert location, but it was a location that was prioritized by the town as being a good example to the community of how green infrastructure and low impact developments can be used in other places in the town. So now I think I'm going to pass it over to Bruce to kind of talk about that type of priority that they had brought for green infrastructure.
Thank you, Chris. So the Heritage Park area for the LIDs that we're recommending at that facility, opportunities to increase water holding capacity of the grassy area adjacent to the pond, create design wetland area that improves aesthetics and provide public access as well as flood management, integrate gathering spaces and pedestrian traffic from the sidewalk into the Basin Park and beyond. Remove invasive species and non-native species from along pond edge and improve habitat for pollinators and wildlife. And on the center field portion, we have some opportunities there as well. This isn't part of culvert inspections or anything like that. But like you said, Chris said, it's a low impact development, which will assist obviously the area at the center of town. Opportunities for the town to expand the basin footprint to increase water holding capacity and prevent flooding of the field and roadway. Dredge and deepen the basin underground to further expand water holding capacity. create naturalized edge to the basin in order to support a much wider range of plant species and wildlife species, improve aesthetics and create a pedestrian access to design basin features from crosswalks to field, keep existing ornamental trees and remove invasive species and create an edge habitat.
So as I said before, these locations were selected by the town to have further concepts done to them by Landscape Interactions. So I'm going to pass it over to Casey now here from Landscape Interactions, kind of go over these concepts.
Chris, thanks, Ruth. So our role as Landscape Interactions was to design these low impact stormwater management solutions for Heritage Park, which is on the right, and for Centerfield on the left. Apologies, the text is a bit small, but you can go up to the board later and check out. Basically, what you're missing is our plant list is down, an abbreviated plant list is at the bottom, and then the various pollinator species supported at the top. I'll go into detail on those in a bit. But in both sites, we propose using naturalistic design elements to, as we said before, slow down the flow of water, increase soil infiltration, and improve water quality, all to address the local flooding issues during storm events at both sites. And the sort of backbone of our work as a company is in expanding plant biodiversity and introducing a wider range of native plant species to both sites. And sort of the reason behind this, the root systems of native plants do a better job of stabilizing soils and filtering runoff than your typical ubiquitous non-native turf grasses. And more so, they'll also provide invaluable habitat for pollinators and other wildlife. So as with all of our work, we created locally specific plant lists. They're tailored to expanding habitat for native bees and butterflies listed at the top there. And these are species that are specifically at risk of extinction in the East Longmeadow area. So this is a very specific plant selection. All of the plants we suggest serve as pollen, nectar, or host plants for one or more of the pollinators listed here. At Centerfield, so over on the left there, we propose a few different planting zones based primarily on soil moisture and topography. The primary goal of this design is to expand the basin footprint. And conceptually, it's by about 4,800 square feet. And that is to increase the water holding capacity in addition to any dredging and deepening of the basin that we can do. The new basin edge will be north of the crosswalk. So there is an opportunity to create a more interesting visitor experience entering the park through this footbridge. You can kind of get the sense of it at the top left there, that rendering. And where there's currently these rip-wrapped edges in this very rectilinear, almost like a swimming pool basin, we propose a naturalized undulating basin edge to provide more planting area while maintaining capacity, and also to improve aesthetics. Having more real estate for native vegetation will not only increase wildlife habitat, but it will also increase the opportunity for infiltration and to hold more runoff from the roads and to treat the water before it exits under that Shaker Road on the right. Yeah. So going over to Heritage Park, on the right side, we propose creating a naturalistic basin design with meandering channels, as you can kind of see in purple there, slopes and berms. So it's designed to receive runoff from the parking lot and the driveway where there's currently these sort of naturally occurring eroded channels. And it will also receive overflow from the pond. This basin will be aesthetically beautiful and full of wildlife and plant diversity. So there's a great opportunity to bring recreational features such as boardwalks, gathering spaces, observation decks into the basin. Across both sites, we designed for 6 zones with distinct plant communities. So that's what the different colors mean in these conceptual designs. Each color is a different assemblage of plants. The first sort of submerged edge habitat is full of plants that are able to sustain permanently wet roots. The second slope, floodable slope zone, which is the light blue, kind of hard to see on this, but that will be the zone that's going to flood and it can manage being dry when there's a drought, but it won't. The plants there won't mind getting wet feet from time to time. Then there's an upland zone for the berms and the islands in light green with shrubs and wildflowers and drought-resistant grasses. And then the yellow zones are alongside the roads, which will have specifically salt-tolerant plants. Theoretically, these plant communities can be applied to any similar areas throughout East Longmeadow, which is important to all of our work because the scalability and the replicability of these designs, it will allow anyone in East Longmeadow to be able to take the plant lists and apply them to their own spaces. So all of these plans will be made publicly available through pamphlets that we'll be making for the town later on this spring. And they'll also be posted on our website. And for now, you can see the current stage of the design on the board up front. That's all for me.
Thank you, Casey. So as Casey said, all of these concepts, including landscape interactions, our culvert concepts, and our other low impact and green structure concepts are available here in person to view on the boards up in the front. If you'd like to make public comments about these here in person today, you can use the form, which is shown as an example here on the right, to make public comments here in person today. But you can also make public comments online using our project website. If you go to the project website, all of these concepts will be available for public comment there also.
So next steps, great job, everybody. So where do we go from here? Our next steps include the public comment period that Chris just spoke about. That's going to continue through the end of this month. All of those forms are options. You can either grab a hard paper of the comment page on the back in the back of this room. You can download them from the website. You can submit your comments through the website, and you can also submit comments through the email. You can provide any comments that you have this evening to us in person. All of those comments will then be gathered and coordinated into our final reporting, which will occur in May of 2023, next month. Those reports will include description of capital improvement plans, and with that, the town can also begin its planning and funding for the projects that as prioritized, including looking for grant opportunities and using the information contained in these reports to help supplement the grant applications. Having done that previous type of studies like that does help when it comes to grants, showing that you've done more than your above and beyond due diligence to identify those. And with that, we'll also include the local permitting that would go with any of these designs prior to being able to implement them. And lastly, we have our upcoming green infrastructure and low impact design workshop, and that date and location is coming soon. It seems that there's a good chance that we'll be making a recording of that, so that will be available on our website, so that even if there's difficulties identifying a site or someone can't make it, we will have a recorded event that will last in infamy, so to speak. And with that concludes our presentation, and I'm going to open it up for questions and discussions. First of all, I'd like to thank the East Longmeadow Board of Public Works and give them an opportunity to see what questions that they have first. And thank you, Bill Bennett, as well as Michael Lynch. And right after they've concluded with their comments and questions, we'll open it up for public discussion or anyone that's online.
Thank you for areas of concern to the town, and you're great help to us overall, and helping Bruce in performing his duties as DPW superintendent. You covered a lot of areas. A lot of the areas we did talk about in our discussions of the operation of the DPW and addressing the concerns that you have here. And I appreciate all the effort that you put into it. It's a lot of work overall, and your specialties in identifying the areas of concern and how to address them is a great help today. As you all know, our resources are kind of tight. We're going after a lot of grants from your recommendations in the near future. And I hope we continue to do it. And we hope to have your help in the future to continue this process. So, Mike.
Well said, Bruce. Thank you all for being here today. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for the presentation. I find that this is a really great opportunity for the town. And as Bruce said, you've identified a number of areas that are of concern that we can focus on and how we can improve some of the areas within town. I think it's also important to consider when planning for these some other projects we have ongoing, so we can tackle them at the same time, as you mentioned, and also looking at ways that we can have that green initiative. I think that's being discussed a lot in today's world, and so thank you all very much for the work you've put into it thus far, and I'm excited to see what the rest of the process looks like and how we can move forward and hopefully make some improvements in some of the areas you've identified. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I just want to take one last moment to thank you for the opportunity, but also recognize your Department of Public Works. Very well led. Myself and Mary both have private experience working for local municipal public works departments, past and current.
The challenges are there for everybody. The problems far exceed the dollars, but you have a lot of programs that a lot of other communities don't have, and you can see that you're doing the best with the means that you have, and glad that we've been able to help in any way that we have. And so it's been a pleasure working with Bruce and his staff, and we thank you too. So with that being said, we'll open it up to the public. And
do we have anyone online that might have any questions or comments?
Only Andrew.
So Andrew Smith is our regional coordinator, and just missed the opportunity to introduce him earlier. Andrew, would you like to take a moment just to say hello and any comments from the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Office?
Hello, everybody. MVP Regional Coordinator for the Greater Connecticut River Valley. Everything you said is true. It takes a lot of work to implement these ideas. And the good thing is you can get started and bite them off piecemeal, I think it's important when you're doing climate change work to zoom out and think long-term about, multiple strategies that can be implemented at multiple scales. So just kind of think like, you don't have to do it all at once. You can get started and move in a direction. And, we're here for grant funding, and we can always support ideas, and we can help move things forward. So yeah, thanks for the time. And that's it. Yeah, just keep up the good work, and just don't be overwhelmed by like how complex things are, because once you get started in one direction, you never know where it's going to stop. So just keep that in mind. Like, it may seem overwhelming to get started, but once you get started, it becomes easier. So just move in a direction and go. That's my pep talk.
Is the committee available to help you in developing the grant? Not only developing the grants or identifying areas that grants may be applied, but also identifying where grant money could be sourced from, and also in writing the grant application. Is a group involved with Bruce in doing that too in the future? Or
I did pose that question a while back, and I'm sure we'll be talking once this process has been completed.
The short answer is yes, absolutely. We feel like we have good experience with that. We've helped a lot of communities get grants from both the engineering consulting side, where I sit right now, and myself as a former Department of Public Works director, pursuing it from that side, understanding communications with the groups such as yourself, the Department of Public Works Commission, as well as the public, and navigating all of those things to identify the best projects to get those funds. It's very competitive. You don't, as you don't bat 1,000. And so what you want to do is you want to pick your opportunities that's going to give you your best chances, and pursue those with your grant fundings. And then you use your local dollars to pursue the other areas that maybe didn't score so well and less likely to get a grant opportunity. So We feel like we can provide value there to Bruce, and we're always available for that. No matter what, even a short conversation or happy to help. When it's not just, we're not here just for the consulting and the consulting fee. We want to see the communities be able to solve their problems, and certainly happy to be available for any advice that we can provide that the town finds useful. Thank you.
Question I have on the plantings and stuff that you mentioned in your presentation. Did the consideration of the type of road treatment that we have in the wintertime, the effect of that on these plantings be considered to some degree, because there's a number of treatments that are available, and what the effect of those treatments are on nearby plantings that so these are more tolerant to those treatments overall?
Yes, I'll let Casey, add some more on that, because I know certainly that's part of everything that's looked at when these plants are being selected.
Yeah, our roadside sort of plant mix is selected and has been implemented in other towns with similar treatments. I'm sure Northampton has a municipal plan where we pick specifically salt tolerant plants that, yeah, I think a lot of their purpose is also to filter chemicals too. Yeah, the short answer, yes.
Okay. You have any questions, Mike?
I do not.
No, but so I like I said, I appreciate everything that you've done and identifying some of the areas with Bruce. We talk about a lot of these projects and where we're trying to budget for them or prioritize them to some degree with the resources we do have. So your advanced planning on this really helps Bruce identifying these activities for us to line up with everything else. And I'd like to see a lot more activity on these things, especially now when there's available grants, because who knows where that's going to be going in the near future. And the sooner we could address it and obtain these grants, the better we could tackle these problems, because they're there, they're not going away. And it would improve the town tremendously in this particular area. So, that's it for me.
Yep. Thank you very much for your time, and have a good rest of your evening, and happy spring.
Okay. I have nothing else for the board.
You want to make a motion to adjourn?
At this time, I will make a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
And I second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.